Okay, and we are live. Whoa. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, June 30th. We are having a few technical difficulties with our mic, so we hope the audio isn't too bad. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We do have a special guest with us, and we will, of course, get to him a little bit later in the show. That's Dwight McDonald is here today. Of course, I'm Adam Hernandez with my co-host, Dr. Nick Bergfeld. And we don't really have much in the way of city updates as far as what's going on in city council. They've got a pretty slow week, right?
Yeah, so this is summer vacation time, not just for all of Lubbock citizens who are actively trying to get out of the city. So our airport is currently maxed out. They're having to open up covered parking faster than they anticipated. A lot of folks are getting out of town right now. Similarly with the city council. So no city council meeting this week. And so instead, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the work that's been happening on the east side in East Lubbock. Some really great community events have been happening, and some really great ones coming up as well. And just wanted to get Adam's insights actually on some of these meetings. So there was a really big one just this past week that East Side Unity helped to organize around a conversation about economic development on the East Side, a very cool model called a community investment trust, and then also some additional programming and events for the East Side community. And so, Adam, you were able to attend this event and participate as a presenter. What was exciting about this event, and what are the things to look forward to over these coming months?
Yeah, so it was a great meeting. A lot of people showed up. I want to say there was maybe 50 people, would you say, somewhere around there, which was a really good turnout. Matter of fact, it was promoted for maybe a week or a little less. So I was actually happily surprised that as many people showed up as they did. Everybody was really receptive to the information. It was a good conversation about some issues in the community. It didn't get contentious or anything. Everybody just kind of discussed their points and what they thought may be some solutions or maybe some ideas. And so I got to speak a little bit about getting involved on a civic level. That went over pretty well also. So I'm just overall, I'm really excited to see the energy in East Lubbock really ramp up around just revitalizing the area, getting involved civically, and then just even on a community level amongst ourselves. And so yeah, it went really well. And then so that is going to go into what I'm calling the East Lubbock Empowerment Conference, and we're doing that in conjunction with the folks over at Eastside Unity, Jay Shaw, and the whole team over there. And for those of y'all who don't know Jay Shaw, he is the guy who founded the Facebook group Eastside Unity, which is actually a 501c3 now, and has been for quite some time. They do a lot of events in the community, very community-centric events. So everything is very inclusive of the entire community. They want to make sure that they're, looking out for the kids and at all the events and all of these kind of things. So they did some really great stuff for Easter and Mother's Day. And so we really are doing kind of the same things. And so we decided to join forces and just go ahead and do the East Lubbock Empowerment Conference together. And so that's going to basically be the next step from what happened on at the Unity and the community meeting. And so basically actually just making a concrete action plan based on kind of some of the things we talked about. And then ideas that some of the community leaders and others that will be there may have. So,
one question that I think a lot of people ask when they see or hear about this kind of energy that's happening on the East Side, the question is, why now? Right? Like,
yeah.
What is it about this moment that you think is causing for this kind of energy, this type of interest to be happening?
Yeah. So I think it's a mixture of things. There's already been organizations and of course the neighborhood associations doing these things. Jay Shaw and them have been doing stuff year after year. And so these things, they have really been the ones that have just kept things going. I have seen a ramp up in the energy since last summer, since Lubbock Compact kind of started going around and mobilizing folks. And so I think it's just a mixture of really everything. Also, what I'm noticing with the younger generations, they're really more socially minded than I remember, me and my peers being at their age. And so I think just overall, I can't really put my finger on one thing, but I think just overall the energy seems to be lifting up and ramping up in that area, and I'm excited.
Yeah, and when I see these developments, because as an outsider, it's oftentimes hard to know when it's appropriate to engage or not engage, and whether or not it even makes sense to attend a meeting. Sometimes you think about, oh, am I actually an intruder on this? And I think one thing that Eastside Unity has done a really great job is to show that they want input in the conversations, and they want engagement across the city in these conversations, because the development of the East Side ultimately will be something about all of us, right? And about the city of Lubbock stopping the way that it's been using resources over time, and reinvesting in these older communities, in these older neighborhoods. And so, for somebody on the outside who's intimidated or concerned about, oh, I want to help, but I don't necessarily know if how I can engage, what is it that you would tell them or tell somebody like that?
I would tell them just to start showing up to some of these meetings and being around. You'll find that, which but others who may not have been around East Lubbock very much at all, you'll find that people are very welcoming as long as they know that you're genuine, and that they don't detect any sort of bad faith initiative going on. I mean, which I really haven't seen a lot of. I don't think I've seen any of with folks from outside the community that have been wanting to help. I've actually gotten asked this question as I've moved around to other parts of the city, talking to folks, and I think that's step number one. Just kind of come and listen is a good thing, and a lot of folks do that. Just pretty much just come and listen, and then propose something. If you have something that you think may be able to help, or you may have some resource or something of that nature, nobody's going to be mad at you for sharing that. So there's plenty of ways that you can get involved, but I would say step number one is definitely just kind of hanging around.
Yeah, and that's the ideas I think that get proposed at these meetings, to me, is so exciting to see how much the community wants to innovate, and how people are really thinking outside the box when it comes to how do we kickstart development. And I remember one proposal that a fellow gave during the meeting was about creating an East Lubbock dollar. And the idea is that if there was an East Lubbock dollar, then it's much easier to make sure that money is circulating in the community for a longer period in time before it exits. And I've seen a lot of people start to pick up on this idea that we need to find ways to make sure that dollars circulate locally more frequently or more often. And I'm curious where this type of realization is coming from, right? I haven't seen this type of activity before, but it seems like people now are really focusing on how do we honor or how do we empower the local businesses that we have here, and how do we make sure that as purchasers, as consumers, as patrons, that we can also be engaged in this. And I'm curious, where do you feel like this is coming from?
Yeah. Well, he mentioned that he had seen this happen, I guess in some other communities. I don't remember the places he mentioned, but he had mentioned that he had got that idea from these areas. I think it's a good idea. I think that a lot of folks are just in general in our communities, just starting to realize the importance of economics, right? And a community, and building an economy and maintaining that economy. And what has happened over time that a lot of people are now more aware of, it's always been happening, and some folks were always kind of aware of it, and some folks were just going about their business and didn't really ever think about it. But so for instance, if you look in the Lubbock Disparity Report, there's a score they give cities that show if people are having to come far to come shop in the area, or if they actually live there. And what you see about Lubbock is something that we know, is that if you live in East Lubbock or North Lubbock, maybe not so much north, you're a little closer to some things, but especially East Lubbock, you pretty much have to drive maybe at least 10 minutes, maybe 15 or 20 minutes to get somewhere, to some sort of amenity, or a lot of the restaurants, a lot of the just all the kind of amenities that Lubbock has. And so we do know that that's, factually an issue, and also anecdotally an issue, as we see in the community. And I think that just more people are starting to become aware of that than ever before. I feel like it's a mix of things, but I think that the George Floyd situation, though it was one of many and continues to be one of many, we're not quite sure why that was the one, but that was the one, I think, that really, really pushed more people into all of this kind of thing, and started to say, hey, we have to do something.
Yeah, and then the final one exciting event did happen this week, which is the Beyond the Report series that our local PBS affiliate KTTZ began to release some of their content for that, and there'll be 8 10-minute video. It'll be a 10-minute video, eight episodes of a 10-minute video series. There also is an audio recording series that's going to come out with this, as well as some accompanying materials online. You've been pretty involved in these conversations because, to the PBS group here, huge shout out to them and their efforts in documenting a lot of the activism and advocacy that's happened in Lubbock since the summer protest movement. And they've convened these groups together that you've been able to participate in on this. And so, what are you excited about as this series starts to come out, and Lubbock citizens are now going to hear about these efforts across the community to resolve environmental justice issues and all these things? Over these next couple of weeks, people are going to really get exposed to this in a much bigger way. And how do you think about that? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm actually on the advisory board of this Beyond the Report situation, and so there's several of us on this board. So I've been able to kind of see the evolution of it, pretty much from beginning until now. And I have not been able to watch the full episodes. I wanted to have a minute to be able to actually sit and enjoy them.
Good.
Yeah, I didn't want to kind of, I've been all over the place this week, and so I really wanted to be able to sit down and watch it. And so I'm excited to see it, but I'm also excited because, again, I think this just feeds more into the momentum that's already going, and I think I think it's just only going to embolden the energy to see. I mean, all of the people that are interviewed in this series are people that are deeply connected to the community. Many for many decades, right? A lot of veteran pioneer activists from the city, but also a lot of the younger crowd of activists, people around my age or maybe even younger. And so I think that that's going to be a source of pride for folks in the community. I think it's going to really just kind of add to that energy.
Oh, I totally agree. And, the first episode of the video series ends with this very, very short statement from Marianne Lawson. And just the way that it's framed, it really pulls you in, and you can feel both the sense of frustration that these issues are so clear in our community and yet so longstanding, as well as a feeling that change is happening. And I think that, to me, is what's so exciting about this series, is they're really capturing these kind of early moments of new community activism, where so many groups have tried to elevate these issues in the past. And so it really just keeps taking, each generation has to keep carrying that forward. And what I love about this series is it really bridges the gap between some of the original groups in the community that were advocating and doing activism, many of them who are still active today, like Rose Wilson at 93, who was actually part of a trash cleanup community event just this weekend, in the heat and everything like that. And it's just so inspiring, I think, to see folks who have been plugged into these conversations for decades and still keeping that fire and still keeping that energy. So, I think it's great. Definitely Google Beyond the Report Lubbock. and you'll see the information on there and the website. The releases, the video ones will come out on Mondays, the audio ones will come out on Wednesdays, and please, subscribe to those, follow them, make a note on your calendar, because they really tell the story of activism in Lubbock in a very beautiful way.
Yeah, and just one more quick shout out just to remind everybody, the East Lubbock Empowerment Conference that we were speaking about is happening July 17th. It's a Saturday morning, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. It's going to be at the May Simmons Community Center. And then the next one coming up after that, or the next event rather, coming up after that would be the Eastside Family Reunion is kind of what it's called, but it's also a back to school supply and backpack giveaway, and they'll have some socks and underwear for the kids, and all free food and all kinds of stuff that will be happening in the morning, and then it'll go into kind of like a family reunion type gathering, but all are welcome. Anybody who lives on the east side, family and friends of people in East Lubbock, everybody's welcome. There will be a parade to kick things off, and that's going to be on August 14th. And I'm blanking on the exact times right now, but rest assured we will be filling you in on that as time goes along. So, as we usually do at this time, if you are enjoying the show, please consider donating to Lubbock Compact. You can go to lubbockcompact.com/donate. You can do a one-time donation or a recurring donation. You can donate any amount that you feel comfortable with, and every bit helps to do the work that we're doing, which of course includes the production of this show and keeping folks informed and mobilized to empower their communities. And so once again, that's lubbockcompact.com /donate. And don't forget that you can also volunteer by going to lubbockcompact.com /volunteer. And as always, as we go through the show with Mr. Dwight McDonald, you can put your questions in the Facebook comments or in the Zoom Q&A, and we will get those answered for you. So without further ado, I will let Nick introduce our special guest.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this as Dwight comes on. When our production manager, Jake, told us that Dwight had agreed to come onto this, I was just so excited. I just immediately I knew this was going to be a fantastic conversation. So Dwight is somebody who everyone in the community should know, but actively tries not to make sure that anybody knows about him. So he's been a public defender, a civil rights advocate, a magistrate for the city of Lubbock, a law professor at Texas Tech. He runs one of the law clinics there. Is just somebody who's so deeply embedded in civil rights and activism efforts in the city of Lubbock that he's so far deep that many people don't even know about him. And so that to me is so exciting about having him on here. And allowing us to have this type of dialogue because of just the breadth of interactions that you've had both in the community, but also in city policy and in city government life. And so thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you all for having me. Very kind. If I might, when you all were discussing being in East Lubbock and having to drive 10 minutes or 15 minutes to get to any place and for any of the amenities in the city, one of the other things that that came to mind for me as what's missing is as far as all of the teenagers and young kids, there's not a driving school on the east side of Lubbock. So if you are going to take driver's ed or going to do any kind of driving school to get your driver's license, you have to have the ability to get all the way to the west side of town in order to do so, which is inconvenient, if not at times impossible, for the young people on the east side of Lubbock. So you can add that to the list of things that you may want to discuss as you move forward in trying to get some economic development going on the east side.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a great idea. And this is the second time in a week where I've just been stunned by some of these basic needs. There was a fellow at this community event that we talked about earlier who mentioned a similar issue when it comes to home health aid education. And because they need some kind of accreditation and some kind of continuing classes, things like that. There's a lot of home health aid companies on north and east sides. A lot of folks working for those companies come from those communities, but there's actually nowhere for them to get their certification or any of their continuing education within the community itself. And it's just so every time when we see these sort of, it's just layers upon layers of barriers, that prevent people from being able to pursue economic opportunities. And so I think it's a great interest. But I would say, Dwight, how about if you could tell the folks listening out there a little bit about yourself before we just jump right into all these, because I love that.
I think you covered it all. I grew up in Dimmitt, Texas, and have been in Lubbock since 1990 when I came here to go to law school. Started off in private practice doing just about anything, and then I worked my way into focusing primarily on doing criminal defense work. And as part of that, got involved with local government and was asked to be on some boards and those kinds of things. So I've had the opportunity to kind of give back to the community by being involved civically, and that continues today. And then about 6-7 years ago, I transitioned into teaching out at the law school. Still try to be civic minded and involved, and have continued to do that part. But that's basically it. Just a guy who's working and trying to raise a family and be involved in his community.
Yeah, and let's start with local government, and then I want us to end on activism, because I feel like that's just such a better note to finish on. But we're a local advocacy organization. We focus a lot on government accountability, on transparency. Some of our challenges oftentimes come from difficulties in interfacing with city committees and boards, where a lot of times we'll actually have citizens give tons of public comment and feel a sort of a lack of engagement in terms of whether that committee seems to be interested in citizen input at all, or how the processes go. And so, we look at this a lot and think about this a lot. And I'm curious, because you've had these inside experiences with local government and sitting on boards and things like that. And I'm just curious, how do you look at what would you consider to be the health of Lubbock's current local government? When it comes to the committee systems, when it comes to citizen input, what had been your experiences, and what do you think? Are we good at this? Are we bad at this?
Well, I think we certainly need to get better at this. I think that part of it is, as I tell the young people in my class, people say all the time, it's not what you know, but who you know. I tell them that's wrong. It's not who you know. It's really who knows you. Because the reality is and I use this example, I know Tubby Smith. I've met he and his wife, hung out with them. I've also met Chris Beard. Tubby Smith knows me. Chris Beard does not. If I make a phone call to Tubby Smith, I'm going to get a return phone call. If I make a phone call to Chris Beard's going to go, who's this guy? So yeah, I know them. They don't. It depends on who knows you. And I think that's a big part of the committee system is they appoint people that they know. And so you have got to get involved and meet those folks who are in those positions. So, and let them know that you're interested. You want to be a part of those boards. There's an application you have to fill out and those things, but it's not just enough to fill out the application and turn it in and say, hey, I'm done. You've got to fill out the application, and then you've got to actively pursue opportunities. And you may not get, and what we make the mistake of doing is, I want to be on this board. Well, you didn't get appointed on that board. Well, then I'm not going to be, I don't want this other one. No, you got to start. You got to get your name in there, and then you get in. It may not be the board that you want to be on, but you get on a board. And then when you get on that board, number one, show up prepared. Number two, do the work, because people are watching. And when they see that, then it becomes easier for you to transition to the board that you want. So you've got to, as my granddad used to say, you have to do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. So I may not want to be on this board that you're putting me on, but you know what? I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it well, so that when a position comes open on the board that I want to be on, I can hand you my application and say, you know, you appointed me on this last board and I did a really good job. I would like to be on this board. What that does is, number one, shows that you're willing to do what it is they're asking you to do. And number two, it puts you in a position where you're in front of those folks, at least on a yearly basis, if not more so. So that starts to build a relationship, and then they get to know you, which in turn makes them more comfortable in calling you to put you on that board. So you've got to be involved. It's one thing to show up at the meetings and say, look, here are our concerns. That's great. It's a whole lot different when you're on the other side and you are actually in the room when the decisions are being made and when the discussions are being had. That's where we've got to get to, is we've got to get behind closed doors where those decisions are made. So, and that takes some doing. That takes some doing. But you've got to be persistent. I like what you were saying earlier is, you know what, you've got to pick up where you're at and keep moving forward. And we just keep inching forward over time. It's not going to be a huge leap, but you got to keep moving forward. So yeah, just get involved, show up, ask questions, and then get on board. Fill out your applications, get on. It may not be the board you want, but get on the board so that you can then begin to at least be a participant in the process.
Yeah, I've this has actually been my experience. Actually, Dwight, before last summer, I was 39 years old. I had never voted in my life, wasn't even registered to vote. I didn't even know who. This is how checked out I was from political happenings and political processes. I read the disparity report on a Tuesday. I wanted to ask the city council some questions and just found out that there was a coffee with the mayor happening the very next day. I had to Google who our mayor was because I didn't know who he was. That's how checked out I was. And so I dove in head first and have been involved really heavily in the city council and committee level this whole time. And that has been my experience as I've shown up. And of course, a lot of those times, what we quickly saw was the committees are in need of information a lot of the times that they're not necessarily getting. And so, as you said, it takes some doing for sure, because I'm researching, I'm putting the stuff together, and then I'm going in there to make the comment, to give them the information, or I may be handing them a packet beforehand and things of that nature. And I feel like the relationship has genuinely moved along with a lot of the city staff and the committees. So I can attest to what you're talking about for sure.
Well, and the deal is, we're not all going to agree. That's just a given. But, you know, I think it's important that we have everybody at the table and at least have the conversation. But if you're going to be at the table, you better show up prepared. And so that has been my push is I always try to show up prepared. And even if I don't know, I bring my notebook and my pen, and I'm listening and taking notes because I don't know a lot of this stuff. But I tell people the same thing I used to tell all of my clients. I don't know all the answers, but I generally know where to find them. So I cannot give you, if I can't give you an answer immediately, I'll tell you, I don't know, but let me find out. And so that's my approach on these boards is, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to talk to the people who do know, or I'm going to track down the information. So yeah, it does, you know, it's a pain in the butt. But if you want to see what's going on behind closed doors, if you want to have an effect as far as making changes, then yeah, it's going to be a pain in the butt, but it's necessary in order for you to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And so that's how that, and I just stumbled into this deal. I wasn't really looking to get on boards or do any of that stuff. I knew a couple of the city council folks, and years ago they asked me to be on a board, and I said, okay, that's fine. I didn't know, and I figured I was going to get kicked off that board, and I did. But but my approach is I am always for transparency. I think we ought to And what you find out when you get on those boards and you get behind closed doors, you find out that there are people there who have agendas, and it doesn't take long to figure out who the people are that have agendas and what the agenda is. And sometimes that agenda aligns with the mission of the board. A lot of times it may not. Well, I'm the type of person that, hey, I'm just going to call it what it is. And if it's, if you got a problem with it, then we just have a problem. And so when I got one of the first boards I got appointed to was the LP&L board back in 12 or 13, something like that. And my law partner at the time, when I told him about it, I was like, hey man, they just called me and asked me to be on this board, the LP&L board. And he was like, you didn't do it. I said, yeah, I told him I would. Said, you're not going to make it a year. You're going to get kicked off that board. I was like, bro, come on, man. Kicked off for what? He was right. I did get kicked off. So, but I got kicked off for trying to do the right thing.
To follow up on, in Lubbock life, there are two very unique boards, and that is the board of Lubbock Power and Light and the board of LEDA. And those two boards, Lubbock Economic Development Light.
Yes.
And those two boards are not appointed through the typical appointee committee system that essentially every other board, every other committee that the city of Lubbock goes through that process. And so you've had this kind of unique experience in city life and city government. And I'm just kind of curious if you could just talk a little bit about that. And you mentioned that one of these boards you ended up getting kicked off on. If you don't mind sort of talking a little bit about that experience.
Okay. I call it the LP&L board, but it was actually the Electric Utility Board is its official title. At the time, we were dealing with several issues. We were talking about going to smart metering. We were trying to decide, because in 2019, our contract with Xcel Energy was going to expire. And so we were trying to figure out, what are we going to do for, are we going to keep the lights on at this place after 2019? And there were 2 or 3 options that we discussed. One was building our own power plant. Another was going to another electrical distributor instead of Xcel. Another was just going on the market on the Southwest Power Pool and purchasing that way. So we were working through all of these issues. And it didn't take, like I said, it didn't take long to figure out that there were people there who had agendas. One of the people on that board at the time, Mark McDougal, his agenda was to get LP&L to pay for putting all of the electricity lines underground because they were redeveloping downtown, and McDougal Properties were, and they wanted the LP&L to pay for putting those transformer lines underground. Like, well, I don't know that LP&L should be paying for that, man. I mean, it'll help you develop downtown, but the reality is you're the developer. And then there were some other issues. The mayor did not get along with Gary Zing, who at the time was the CEO of LP&L. Any idea that Gary Zing had, the mayor was going to be on the exact opposite. Because when we first started this, at the time the mayor was Glenn Robertson. When we first started this, Glenn Robertson was in favor of building a power plant for the city, that the city should build its own. And then Gary Zing got behind that, and that flipped it. And the mayor was like, oh, he made allegations that Gary Zing had kind of rigged the bid process for the power plant. Big investigation. He's saying that people are going to prison and blah, 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 blah. Guess what? Nothing happened. Gary Zing, there was found to be no wrongdoing. And there were other issues going on. And the mayor, in executive session, which is supposed to be confidential, we would have these conversations about employees and retention and that stuff, because we were, and we still do have employees that will leave the city's employee either with the police or just the city or whatever, and they go to bigger and better things. They head to the Metroplex because they get more pay. And so we were discussing that, and we had not filled some positions. People had left. We hadn't filled positions. And we were trying to get that done, and we were having some conversations about how we were going to do that and what to do. And the mayor walked out of that meeting and went to the media and told them that LP&L was over budget, that we had spent money that we really had not spent because we hadn't replaced those folks. And so and first of all, I was like, number one, why is he discussing things that we discussed in executive session? And number two, why is he not being truthful about it? And so the next week, the chairperson of the LP&L board came to me and said, hey, look, they want to do a radio interview. Do you want to, would you like to discuss, the things that the mayor said? And that's fine. I don't care. And so they asked me about it, and I was like, that's not true. Here are the facts. This is what happened. And he was sitting in the meeting when we discussed this. Why he came out and said that, I don't know. And I said, we're all entitled to our own opinion. We're just not entitled to our own set of facts. And so that happened like on a Thursday. Monday, I get a phone call from then City Attorney Sam Medina saying, we need to visit with you about your service on the LP&L board. It appears as though you have a conflict. And I was like, now, mind you, I've been on the board for like 9 months. It's like, what conflict? You're a city employee and you can't be on there. And I said, I'm not a city employee. I'm a magistrate. I'm a contract employee. I don't get any benefits. I'm not on your health insurance or any of that. And so they came up with this whole big thing to boot me off because I was receiving pay. Now, they wanted me to resign. I told them I'm not going to resign. You put me on in public, you can kick me off. And so I went to the city council meeting and we had a long discussion about my service. And I pointed out to them, you all are making a big deal about this pittance of money that I make as a magistrate, which I did put on my application. So you all knew I was a magistrate when you appointed me to this position. And secondly, Mark McDougal's family has a contract with the city of Lubbock that far exceeds any money that I make. He's not here. Why is he not getting kicked off? Well, because it pays his corporation. It doesn't pay him directly. I said, well, then how about you all pay my corporation? Don't pay me. Pay my partnership. We're back to square one. That did not. And then I pointed out some other people. And then I said, I had to actually fill out an application to get on this board. How many other people did? I don't know. So they voted to put me off the board. But then Mark McDougal got voted off. And a guy named Carol McDonald got kicked off as well because of the things that I pointed out. And I was like, I may go, but I'm not going by myself. You're not going to treat me differently than you treat other people. So, that, and the whole time my partner was laughing going, I told you, man. I told you, you were not going to make it on that board. So that's and that was my first kind of look behind the curtain to kind of see what was going on.
I think about the journey that Lubbock has gone on since then when it comes to utilities, and I think about the period in time where you were a part of this conversation and how critical that moment was when it came to thinking about, we're just going to essentially, we're going to take off all the brakes, lift up the emergency brake. We're just going into ERCOT, right? And then it just became this whole sort of drive into that. And I think about that. I mean, even the Gateway Fund, right, which was essentially through utility fees, mostly paid through
Yes.
LP&L bills to build roads in South Lubbock. It's interesting how much of these challenges in inequity in the city of Lubbock actually flowed through that board and the conversations that were happening then. And I'm just kind of curious, as you're looking back on this now, and you've seen likely the Lubbock citizen irritation with ERCOT has already started because we came in and immediately got told we all have to decrease the amount of power that we're using to prevent brownouts. And I'm just curious, how do you, in your mind, how do you think about this, right? And how this has played out?
Well, I think about it in a couple of different ways. One, I think about it financially, and I'm like, we spent $200-300 million because we had to pay. I say we, the citizens of Lubbock, had to pay to connect to ERCOT, connect the power lines to ERCOT, and we spent $200 or $300 million to connect up to ERCOT. when we were talking about building a power plant, depending on the size, we were talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of between 350 and up to $500 million. And it would have been natural gas fired, so we wouldn't have had to, we weren't, it was going to be cleaner. And so I think about that and I'm thinking, if we had done that, maybe we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in, and we certainly wouldn't be asking people to, 2 weeks after we switch over to ERCOT to go, oh, by the way, you're going to need to conserve energy. Like, you asked us to join your, it's not like this was an overnight decision. This has been years in the making. And now that we're here, you're telling me, we may not have the capacity to deal with that. And part of it is, Texans, we have this rugged individualism. We don't want the federal government telling us anything. So we want our own. And that's how ERCOT got started, because we didn't want FERCA to have anything to do with the way that energy or electricity is transmitted across state lines. So we said, we're not going to transmit anything across state lines. We'll do our own here in Texas. Forget about the rest of those people. Well, I agree a lot of times. I'm not a big fan of the government, but there are some things that the government does really well, or at least better than we can do. And so sometimes it's not a bad idea to say, this is one of those things that they do better than we do. So let's let them help us with this. Because if you notice, in February, 151 people died because of that outage. And our legislators we're going to fix this. We're going to get this done. Well, what did they do? Number one, they kicked off everybody off the board who was not from Texas. I don't know. The other thing they did was say, you have to weatherize. And then that's it. They didn't do anything else. And so, and the crazy thing is, nobody's holding them accountable. And we're going to have a special session in July. And I don't believe that's on the issue. I don't believe that topic is on there. So it's done for at least 2 years, if not forever. So that part is hard for me to deal with, thinking we could have had our own. There would have been some issues because you can't run the thing 24/7, 365. There, you have to do maintenance and that stuff. So you have to have access to other providers, which I think you could. If you were in the South, if you remained in the Southwest Power Pool, you could have access to other providers while you're doing maintenance and that kind of stuff. But it would certainly make things a heck of a lot better for the citizens of Lubbock. Now, maybe not do all that great for the citizens of Texas, but that's what we're concerned about, Lubbock. And so, and LP&L had the ability to pay for this through bonds. Interest rates were fairly low at that time, so we would have been able to get that taken care of. And there was the distinct possibility that we could sell any excess electricity back into the Southwest Power Pool, and possibly even start to sell it to ERCOT. But that opportunity has come and gone, and we've made our choice now. So I guess we're gonna ride it out, and hopefully ERCOT will.
That's kind of follow up on this ERCOT thread is, so technically Lubbock, no pun intended, still has a choice when it comes to choice. In that, we've paid out, you probably saw in the news, we paid out, 70 million plus to get out of the 25-year contract we signed 3 years ago. And we're going to make $4 million payments annually over the rest of that, which is pretty incredible. We did that to go into the choice market so that, we essentially could transition over. But, one alternative here is to say, as you mentioned, the price of energy generation, of power generation, has gone down a lot. And if Lubbock actually, as a community, we could actually stay within the ERCOT marketplace, but not necessarily transition to choice. And the city of Lubbock could do that bond raise that you mentioned. The interest rates are still phenomenal. We actually could build, say, solar or natural gas and sell that into the ERCOT grid system now. The transmission lines have been built, right. Everything like that. And I'm kind of curious, the cost of these things has come down a lot. I'm curious how you view the value of choice, because that has really become the major talking point in Lubbock and for our politicians. But there's not really a conversation about it, if that makes sense. They just say, well, citizens in Lubbock want choice. and there's not another level to that, right? There's not another level deeper of what that means. And I'm curious how do you feel about choice and us transitioning into that?
Well, I think that you've got to be careful with that because, give you an example, I have a cousin who lives in Killeen. He and they're part of ERCOT, so they got the choice, and so he opted for whatever the lowest was over the year. And but when this incident happened in February, his bill went from like $150 a month to like $5,000 in, not for the month, in 3 days. So there's a downside to that they don't discuss. And so you really don't have that. And I think they've tried to propose some legislation to kind of control the market fluctuations. But still, people hear choice and they go, oh, yeah, I can choose my own. Well, how many of us really know about electricity distribution and how that stuff actually works? So part of it is, as a defense attorney, I used to tell my clients, my job is to make sure that you have information so that you can make an informed decision. It's easy to make a decision. This sounds great. Hold on. There's some stuff on the backside of that thing that may not be so great. My job is to make sure that you have all the information so that you can use that. Well, they're not doing that. They're just talking about choice, and they're not really giving us all of the information. They're giving you the buzzword and go, yeah, I can figure this out. No, you can't. That stuff is not easy. And so, but that's again part of that rugged individualism in Texas. I can manage this better than them. Maybe not. So it's probably, sometimes it's not a bad idea to not have choices, and have folks who are experts in the area make those decisions because they're experts. There's a reason that they call them experts. So that's part of the deal. And that's what concerns me is we're going to get into, well, we're in this deal now. I kind of laughed because I saw a couple of letters to the editor. We need to just tear up that ERCOT contract and get out. And I'm like, that's not how that works, man. You can tear it up. You're going to pay for it. And then you got to start all over. So you're going to pay twice for what you've already got. So, at this point, you've got to try to figure out the best of a bad situation. And so that's my concern. But again, I'll go back to 2012, 2013, 2014, when we were having these discussions and agendas got in the way of being able to move forward and possibly do what's best for Lubbock and keep us out of this situation that we're in right now. But you can't go back and undo it. So you can't look back now. You may as well, hey, we got to go forward. We got to figure out what we need to do next. And so I think part of your duty as government is to provide information, even information that you don't think is good. It all needs to be shared with the public. I think they would be surprised. The public, I mean, we're all adults. We are accustomed to dealing with real life situations when things don't go our way. Just tell us. Just tell us. And then don't just point out the problem, have a solution. Look, here's the problem. This is how we got here. This is where we're at. Here's what we're going to do to try to alleviate that. That's what I think government should do. Does it always do that? No. Matter of fact, it hardly ever does that. But, that's what I think we should be doing. So that's my 2 cents worth.
I actually think it's a great transition to this sort of final piece to talking about activism, and advocacy. And so you've been both a magistrate and a public defender. And what I hope to get out of this part of the conversation is, from your insights, what do you want the activism and advocacy community of Lubbock to know about our challenges and how we can be helpful, to the things that you see on the ground and the difficulties that you encounter on a daily basis, and just sort of let's start there, and I think that we'll go from there.
All right, now I'm going to jump on you, Adam, right here. telling me that you were 39 and never registered to vote until just recently. Number one, I think that is the biggest thing, because here's the reality. If you can't hold people accountable, I don't know if you all have children, I have too. The thing about children, they're going to do things that you don't want them to do. And the only way to change that is to hold them accountable. Well, politicians are kind of the same way. If there's no accountability, whatever, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. You may be unhappy about it, but you're not holding me accountable. So I think that's the first thing is people have got to get organized and register and vote. It's not enough to just register. You actually have to vote, and you have to let people know I'm voting. And then you need to make sure that the powers that be understand what your agenda is. This is what I want. And if you're not going to do that, then I'm going to find somebody who will. I'm not going to support you. We're friends. I know you. I like you. I ain't going to support you. Not in this, because I have an agenda. The group that I'm with, we have an agenda. This is what we want. And we're going to gather up folks who are like-minded, and we're going to register people, and we're going to show up and vote, because that's the only thing that politicians care about is getting reelected. The day they win the election, they breathe a sigh of relief. The next day, they start working on getting reelected either 2, 4, or 6 years later. So that's the way you hold people accountable, is you have to go to the polls. If you don't go to the polls, you're just making noise. And I'll a lot of times they'll pay respect and they'll listen. I'm not going to do anything because you can't hold me accountable, or you don't hold me accountable. Now, it had gotten so bad in the last couple of years that some politicians wouldn't even listen. Hey, man, I don't want to hear that. You're not going to vote anyway, so I don't care what you have to say. I'm not listening to it. Or there were some politicians who didn't even show up to debates. I'm not going to debate you. The public, I'm not going to debate you, because the people that are going to vote for you, there are not enough people that want to hear about what's going on here between us to make a difference. So to me, that is a huge disrespect to the populace, is to say, I'm not even going to debate this person and have a discussion about our ideas. It's just wrong. So you've got to get people motivated into the polls. The other thing, you've got to have an agenda. You can't just show up and say, I'm mad. Well, I understand that. What's your solution? What do you want? I understand that I was at a seminar. I put on a seminar for Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association this past weekend. We had Beto O'Rourke speak. Some people were not happy about that. And he spoke about, criminal justice reform. It wasn't political. He just talked about criminal justice reform. And one retired judge out of Fort Worth was really upset. And I was a course director, so she started griping at me about the fact that we're making this political and we're not supposed to be political. And I was like, ma'am, it's not political. He's just talking about this, that, and the other. And she just griped at me for like 15 minutes. And I finally said, ma'am, what do you want me to do? Go in there and turn him off right now? I mean, what is your solution? I've heard you, you're upset. I get it. What is your solution? And she didn't have one. So that a lot of times is what we do as public members of the public, is we're upset about something, we gripe about it, but then we need a solution. You've got to say, this is what I want. This is what I think you should be doing. And you've got to approach the people who have the power to put those solutions into effect and say, look, here's the problem that I've got. Here is what I think we ought to do about this. What are you going to do about it? And then hold them accountable. So it's not enough to just be upset and be angry about what's going on. There has to be some kind of solution that goes with that. Otherwise, you're just making noise. And if you're just going to make noise, just like with your kids, if you yell all the time, they eventually tune you out. So the only person that looks crazy in this situation is you as the parent, because you're just yelling and your kid's like, I'm moving on. That's what happens when you don't have solutions. If you're just yelling, you got to have solutions, and then you got to hold people accountable through your vote and money. Money gets folks' attention as well. You do some fundraising and you find an opponent for them and then raise money for that opponent, that gets their attention. They will then listen when you have issues because you have demonstrated I'm going to do something about this if you don't listen.
Yeah, this is a perfect thing to end on, and I'm glad you said that, Dwight, because and I welcome the criticism for not voting. I was that guy. I was the guy that was telling the people that were around me that there was no value in voting. They're just going to do what they want to do, yada yada yada. And so now I have, for this past year, had to face my own medicine, right? At now as I turn 180 degrees and and now I'm telling people that it's very important to vote. And just to go back to what
Adam,
you
if
said,
I can interrupt you,
no agenda.
Adam.
So,
Adam,
I got this
that's called growth.
phrase from a professor at Yale. It's Professor Ian Shapiro. He's a political science professor, and he said that politics without policy is empty, but or excuse me, policy without politics is empty, but politics without policy is blind. And he one of the examples he held up was the Occupy Wall Street movement. Because like you said, they went out there, they were upset. First of all, they went to New York. They didn't go to Washington where somebody could have done something about it. They went to New York. So that was mistake number one. Mistake number two was he showed some footage from back then, and I had vaguely remembered the times, but when he showed it, you can just kind of see kind of how ridiculous a lot of those people sounded, because they were asking them, what do you want? What specific things do you have? What's your agenda? And it was just like all these idealistic type of just stuff they were just
I remember it
spitting
really
out.
well. Yeah. Oh, you don't understand. It's
Right.
not about one. It's about inequality.
Right.
In general.
Yeah.
We have to fix it now.
Well, then what do you?
Yeah,
what
and
do you
so, yeah, and so I've been this is kind of where I'm going with this East Lubbock Empowerment Conference, and this is going to be an ongoing process, but that's kind of what I've been telling folks surrounding this event, and kind of what we need to do going forward is there's two main things that the East Lubbock community kind of needs to focus on. Number one is our economy. Like you said, money is a big part of everything.
Yes.
And there's so much stuff that can come behind that, right? So that's number one. You got to get the economy up. Number two is we have to get that voting block up, because like you said, these politicians know where the voter numbers are coming from.
Absolutely.
And it's mostly District 4, District 5, District 6. They know we're not voting like that. So like you said, yeah, they'll listen to you. They'll take some of your frustration as you go in there into city chambers and you yell at them for a minute, and then you go away, and then they know that you're not going to that to the polls. And so yeah, I totally agree with you there, and I think that's a perfect thing to end on. I guess this is the part of the show where we give the guests time to get any shout outs in, or anything that you may want to let the people know, anything at all. Final words.
Well, I just wanted to say I was not jumping on you, but when you're talking about you're now that person who's now telling everybody else they need to vote, what I said was that shows growth and maturity, and that's all we can ask for: progress, not perfection. So I appreciate the fact that you're able to say, look, that was me, and I have seen now that I need to do better. So that's a great thing, and now you actually have the street cred to be able to talk to others who may have had the same thoughts and ideas and say, look, here's what we've got to do. I mean, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy when you sit there on the sidelines and go, well, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. Well, they are if you're not going to hold them accountable. If you're just going to kind of go, they're going to do it, then yes, they are. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you get involved and bring others with you, you can change the direction that these things are going in. So I appreciate the work that you all are doing, because you're giving voice or lending voice to those who have been forgotten or ignored for far too long, and without consequence. And so I appreciate the fact that you all are giving voice to those voiceless and holding folks accountable. And you're doing it with facts. That's the crazy thing is, man, it's really kind of hard to argue with facts. So thank you all for having me on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, and everybody, thank you for tuning in as always. And we would love to have you back on again, Dwight, one of these
100%. Like,
days.
please come back.
Yeah, we got to do this again. We're going to have a lot of recurring guests, which is okay. But yeah, great show, everybody. Dwight, thank you. Thank you, everybody watching, and we will see you next time.